The views and opinions expressed on the Cap are those of the hosts. They do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of OldMilk Media. Any opinions stated aren't intended to offend anyone. On this episode of the Cap Podcast, we react to Some Sexy Songs for You by Drake and Party Next Door. Welcome back. This is episode 602 of your critical but accurate tour through hip hop, the Cap Podcast. We are your tour guides. I am Nate Sperling. That is Taylor McLeod. Thank you for tuning in on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, wherever else you might be tuning in. Feel free to go ahead and join the conversation by leaving a comment, liking this video, and subscribing to the channel. That being said, Taylor, how are you doing today?
Yo, I forgot to say it last episode. This is our fourth year
Yes,
doing this. That's crazy.
for in-depth, intentional years of giving the best reviews in hip hop.
What would that be? Some sexy pods for you?
Oh, okay. I'm moving on straight into the album notes because of that. All right. That being said, on this episode of the Cat Podcast, we are reacting to Some Sexy Songs for You by Drake and Party Next Door. The album is 21 tracks long, 1 hour and 13 minutes long, featuring Pim, Chino Pacas, and Yebba. Once again, join the conversation by leaving a comment in the comments below what you think about Some Sexy Songs for You. That being said, Taylor, what did you think about the album?
So I have two first points, and my first is it's really only a 20 track album after you delete the Mariachi Drake song, because we're gonna get rid of that one. I just want a disclaimer, that one's gone. Second reaction, second point, 20 songs is still way too long. And like I feel like I've been actually pretty good recently about not pointing that out as my first thing for every album that it's too long. But I think here it's like very clear that it's too long. There's too much here. And I think there's good moments on this album, like really good moments that I really enjoy. But I think it gets like I think those get almost drowned out by how many songs there are here.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think 21 tracks is too much. I don't fully agree with you with the mariachi song. In my opinion, and this is probably going to be a consistent opinion I have throughout the episode. I was willing to forgive the stupid Mexican accent that Drake put on because I liked the fact that the beat was nice. There was a Spanish artist on it at least, and the Spanish artist, Chino Pacas and Drake seemed to have some type of chemistry. And then Party Next Door comes in and ruins the whole song. So that's why I don't like the song anymore because Party Next Door had no business on that song. My expectations for this album, I'm gonna just say it straight up. I understand that some people are listening to this for Party Next Door, but the main attraction of this album is Drake. So that's mainly what we're gonna be talking about here. I expect Drake to show us why we should still care by delivering a quality album. Based on the way that he's acted over the past year, the veneer of a superstar, there's certainly cracks in it now. And a lot of people have the opinion of Drake being a loser. And in hip hop in particular, perception is everything. So the general consensus of Drake being a clown and being a loser just isn't good for his career, and that's something that he would do good to kind of put away as soon as possible. Also, in sports, there's a saying that the more talented you are, the more likely people are to put up with your BS. And I think Drake is in that similar category. I think of Drake now as like Aaron Rodgers, where you have two artists who are on Hall of Fame trajectories, still are Hall of Famers, but the last few years have kind of tainted their legacy based off of like character issues. Really, it just comes down to that character issues. And I think because of the character issues we see from Aaron Rodgers, the character issues see from Drake, people are kind of looking at them and like they're not denying the fact that they're still like first ballot Hall of Famers, but they're still like it's not aging as well as you would like for people of those talents. I thought the packaging for the album was all right. I thought that the album cover was all right. I'm not Canadian, so I don't understand the significance of those two buildings in the background of the album cover. Which is, I mean, I guess some Canadians out there respect that. Again, I'm not Canadian, so I don't really have an opinion on that. But overall, I thought the album cover could have been worse. I thought it could have been better, but it was all right at the end of the day. And I'll hand it back to you, Taylor, for some thoughts.
Yeah, I think the older I get, not the older I get, the more that I consume music and the longer it's been, I care about packaging Uh, but I think that like the way things come out nowadays, like it just matters. Like I feel like less and less sometimes. We have real good examples of good packaging, and especially if you're buying the physical albums, especially the vinyls, that's where you still get the real packaging, right? Because we got a bunch of snippets leading up to this. I tried not to listen to them. I used to like be a listen to snippets, get excited, listen to leaks, get excited. Leaks not so much, but definitely snippets, like real snippets put out. But with this album, I came into it with really no expectations, honestly.
Mhm.
Like I had a decent idea of what it would sound like, and it sounds, with the exception of a few songs here, like I think it sounds almost exactly how I thought it was going to sound. Um, and I think when you talk about how things are aging, I think the biggest, as someone who would have previously called myself a Drake stan, like I don't, you know, if you've known me long enough, you know that like he, has been my favorite rapper for a long time, and it's definitely changed over the years. But I think the thing I noticed most compared to when I first started being like, Drake is my favorite, is I don't know if lazy is the right word, but I think there's just so much less thought, or it's so much less meticulous, like little things like beat selection, right? Like we have a lot of instrumentals here that we give other artists a really hard time when a lot of songs sound the same.
Mhm.
And like, I think in previous times, Drake may have gotten a pass for this, but like this album, it's like when you have a lot of songs that sound similar to each other and there's 21 of them, you just start to get the feeling that it's like almost like you're really trying to like work through the album as opposed to like just playing it all the way through and saying like, all right, like you have that build up, right? And every album ebbs and flows, right? But like when you have this many songs and this many of them sound very similar to each other, I think that's when you really start to lose a certain luster for a project like this. And like you said, obviously it's a Drake and P&D album, and there's a lot of people who do love P&D, and I've loved P&D and Drake together for a long time. I think they make really great music together. But like you said, it's like, especially after last year, and I don't want to talk real. I don't want to look at this through the lens of last year anymore, right? Like,
Yeah.
I think that after the Super Bowl and after this album, like we're past that, unless it like sparks up again, and then we'll go back to it. But like, I'm not even looking at it through that 2024 like beef lens anymore. But this definitely is, like you said, like we're here for Drake, right? Like in I don't want to discount P&D on it or whatever, but we're here for Drake. And I think that you said it well yesterday when we were talking about it off camera. Like there's a lot of like flashes of like the Drake that we know can be super talented, make great music, not good music, like great music.
Mhm.
And then there's other moments where it's just, I think like you said, I think when certain, and it's not just music, I think when certain professionals in any field get to a point where everything they do is successful, they start to believe that everything they do is good or like perfect, and it's just not the case. And so you have moments here like a song like Nokia, right, where Drake is trying something new, right? Like it's
Mhm.
maybe not new, but you know what I mean. It's like
Yeah.
the instrumental's different. It's like, all
It's
right, let's
definitely
see
foreign
what
to the album for sure.
Drake can do with this instrumental, and he kills it, right?
Yeah.
I think, and we've had so many Drake moments like that over the years. So when you have that in contrast to, you know, a decent percentage of the songs on here,
Mhm.
it's like, man, we know it's there. Like you said, it's like you just got to do it. And we got it last year with Scary Hours 3, right? Like, or for all the Doug Scary Hours edition,
Mhm.
where it's like different sound, obviously, but it's like, okay, like when Drake locks in, he can still make like great music. It's just sometimes it feels like that level of like locked inness isn't necessarily there.
I completely agree with that. I like that you talk about contrast and stuff like that because when you look at this is Drake's third collab album. When you look at What a Time to Be Alive, you have Drake and you have Future, and Future has his own expertise in what he can do. Drake has his own expertise in what he can do. The match is for a lot of people timeless. When you look at Her Loss, you have 21 Savage who has a specific style of rap that he has mastered. And then you have Drake who once again can do what he does. He has expertise in what he does. And then those styles come together. And both those two albums kind of felt like the other artist was taking the lead. Future taking the lead on What a Time to Be Alive. 21 Savage kind of taking the lead for Her Loss. Not necessarily in terms of like they have more songs than Drake, but just like the overall feel of the album kind of feels like a Future album or kind of feels like a 21 Savage album for both of those. For this album here, I the only Drake and Party Next Door, they sing too similarly. Too similarly. So that being said, like I don't really see the value that Party Next Door adds to this album. I think that this album, I think it could be argued that this album would have been better if it was just a Drake album. Um, I think the only value that I kind of see that's added to this album is, and I think it's smart by Drake, is that this is the first album that Drake has put out since the 2024 beef with Kendrick Lamar and stuff like that. And I think that it's smart that he has picked Party Next Door, who really doesn't do anything better than Drake musically, so that Drake can look better by comparison to Party Next Door. And I think that that's something that's accomplished throughout the album here. There isn't really one point where I'm like, wow, Party Next Door really, really carried that song. There are points where I'm like, okay, Drake does fine, Party Next Door does fine. There's points where Drake carries the song. There are a few songs, quite a bit of songs actually, where it's just Drake or another feature or just Drake by himself. There's probably like two songs where it's just Party Next Door, if that. I know for a fact there's one. So then my other thought about this album is this album enough to rinse the bad taste that was left in the mouths of hip hop fans by Drake being a clown for the past year? And I don't think it is, because some of that clownery is still present on this album. When you see him taking shots at Joe Budden indirectly, you see him kind of like still referencing the beef with Kendrick Lamar. Like if you want to put it behind you and don't mention it at all. But to a point that you mentioned, Taylor, you yeah, about basically saying that you don't want to look at this album through the lens of 2024. I understand that, but at the same time, if Drake is going to keep referencing this, it kind of puts me at a point where I have no choice but to look at it through that lens.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think Kendrick referenced the beef on GNX, right? And then you do
Hmm.
the Super Bowl and there's reference to the beef, right? So it's never going to go away, right? Like this is going to be one of those things where like, people don't talk about Tupac without talking about Biggie. People don't talk about Jay-Z without talking about Nas, right? Like that's just how it goes, and I understand that. I think for me, that's more of a personal thing, like as a
Hmm.
fan, where I'm just like, like I don't, unless we're gonna go back into it, I'm done with it, right? And that's not me as a bigger Drake fan than Kendrick fan. That's just like the dialogue that we've gotten since from people who it sounds like they just started listening. Sometimes it sounds like they just started listening to music in general, or at
Hmm.
least participating in discourse around music. But definitely, there's a lot of like dialogue right now where it feels like the people commenting on the music have never listened to rap before, right? So you have like a lot of like, and again, it's on me for like, letting this stuff like make it into my algorithm, right? And seeing it, but it's like, I mean, people are listening to this album with a fine-tooth comb, being like, that's corny, that's corny, and it's like we could do that to every single album ever,
Hmm.
right? Like if you want to go into that with that hater lens, you could do it to every album, right? Like I could have sat here when we did GNX and been like, oh, you know what I mean? Like what blah, blah, you know what I mean? I could say it. It doesn't have to be true, right? And with an album like GNX, I'm not saying like there is a bunch of that, but it's like we can do it with everyone. So I think that's more what I'm talking about, where it's like
Hmm.
I just can't like me and you aren't doing this to run up like we're not trying to get some brand to like hit our TikTok and be like, hey, you know what I mean? Like, and so you get it so much dialogue where it's like people trying to make their 36 bucks on Twitter,
Yeah.
right? And it's like, and that's where it's frustrating. But like back to this album, it's tough, man, because like I don't want to. It's tough because it's like it is a collab album, and I don't
Hmm.
want to be like dude, like Party Next Door, what are you doing? But it is like I think what always made P&D and Drake collab special is like we got one every once in a while,
Hmm.
and it was like two Toronto artists within OVO linking up to do a song, and then we get a full one. And like you were saying, this is the third collab album. I think What a Time is like a future tape with Drake there.
Hmm.
I think that Her Loss is actually like a pretty perfect combination of two artists and what they do best. Like, Drake was over on 21 side thing on a song like Knife Talk, and then like on a song like Hours in Silence, we had 21 like doing, you know what I mean? And I
Yeah.
love that. And then here, like you said, it's like very similar styles when they get into this like subgenre of hip hop or R&B or whatever you want to call it. I think one thing I really don't like is that the sound is like super crushed on
Hmm.
this whole album, and like it's like this like very very, I wouldn't say aggressive auto tune, but it's like there's like a rattle
Yeah.
in both of their voices, and it's like I don't like that. And I think it for me, like Drake, when he first came out, like even when he was young, he put out like very crisp sounding music, right? And that was like a thing. Like him and 40 could like make this like super cold sounding, but like very crisp music, and we don't get that here. But I do want to get into songs just because
Yeah.
there's a lot of them.
Um, just to respond to your point, like I completely agree with that also. I feel like they kind of sing in like the same on the same level, and that's also part of why I don't understand or why I feel like Party Next Door doesn't really add anything to it. Because like whatever Party Next Door is doing, Drake has already shown on the song that he can do. So it's like, what more are you adding to the song? Additionally, I feel like with this being an R&B album, like I'm expecting some passion vocals. And the vocals are pretty much one dimensional for the most part. Like I feel like there's probably like I would definitely point out Pim's Dilemma, which is crazy because like she's not even like a collab artist here. Like it's not a collab album with Pim's. It's like Drake and Party Next Door and Pims is a feature, and Pims delivers one of the most passionate songs on the whole album. And the other artists have like 20 other chances to create something of passion. And I think that they kind of accomplish that like one time throughout with both of them being able to match that type of passion. But besides that, like the chemistry is kind of mid. The voices, like I said, like there's no passion in the voices at all. A lot of the beats also kind of feel like when they start, they kind of feel like melodies that Drake would pick for one of his intros. And then it immediately falls into like a cookie cutter beat. I also think that the track listing is interesting because like you have like it goes like R&B and then you have two random rap tracks and then it goes to R&B again and then it's like a mariachi track and then a drill track and like again like Party Next Door disappears from like track 7 to track 11. And interestingly enough, I feel like those tracks are better than the tracks before than tracks 1 through 6. I feel like tracks 7 through 11 are better than tracks 1 through 6, and that's just crazy to say because Party Next Door is supposed to be a main artist on this album. And once again, like I said it yesterday also. Like if I had to give plus minuses, I would give Drake a +5, and I would give Party Next Door -15 because like I just don't see the value that's added to from Party Next Door here.
Yeah, it's hard to do a collab album with an artist this big. Like we've only seen it done successfully with Drake specifically, or not once successfully, but in terms of like which is the best of the three, like it is the one with Future, and it's not really close. And I think it's because Drake and Future were both like peaking at the same time,
Yeah,
right? Like
but I
2015, they were
also
both just like skyrocketing.
Yeah, but I also think a part of it also is just like you're right. It is hard to do a collab album with a artist as big as Drake, but I think when you add in the fact that the chemistry isn't really there, and then you add in the fact that they kind of do similar things, it's like you have Drake and you have Drake Light, and that's what this
Yeah,
collab album is. And it's like if Party Next Door could deliver like a completely different sound to add to this, then I wouldn't be saying what I'm saying right now. But like he just simply doesn't.
yeah. I mean, like I'm not the biggest P&D fan in the world, and a lot of it is because of what we're talking about, where it is like it can be very one track minded, and a lot of the stuff is stays in one lane. And obviously he's built a fan base doing it, so like I can't knock it in that sense, right? But it's like for me personally, it's not my favorite. It's not my favorite. And even that stretch from 7 to 11, like you said, where it is just Drake and then Pim has her own song in there, it's like I like those songs, but also like when I come into a album being like this, where it's P and D and Drake making this quote unquote R&B. It's not really R&B, but you know what I mean. It's like the
Mhm,
modern R&B, I guess. It's like I don't want the highlights to be the Drake, like the actual rap songs by Drake, right? Like that.
mhm,
Like I want the, and for me it's not. You know what I mean? Like for me, like Die Trying and Somebody Loves Me, which are 15 and 16, those are my
mhm,
favorites here, right? Like I think, and Die Trying has Yebba on it, who was amazing on Certified Lover Boy with
mhm,
Yebba's Heartbreak, which is now Yebba and Pim have had two solo songs on Drake albums now that are both like incredible. And so like give those two like a ton of credit for that, and Drake for like putting them on albums like that because like they did make great music there. But like Die Trying and Nokia, which are 14 and 15, are like the two that I feel like are the most unique here.
Yeah,
Where it's like we get the on
1000%.
Nokia, we get like the super like electronic, like instrumental, and then Die Trying is acoustic. And it, you know what I mean? And I think those two for me are like the high points here because it's like, all right, let's see what both of you can do on different sounds, right? And I like, and it works the best to me. And so yeah, like we can start from the top, you know, not
Yeah,
all the way from the top, but like I thought CN Tower, it's a little corny, but it's like, all right, listen to it. I was like, all right, it's the intro or whatever. But then we get like it just gets a little stale from the top, which is
yeah,
like this is an album for me. Like I've been playing it driving around a lot. It's a great album for that, right? But like it's if you're like, all right, pick a Drake album to like put in the headphones like when I'm like walking or whatever, like I'm not gonna pick this,
yeah.
right? And
I
it's not because it's
also
bad, but
Yeah, I also think that if you cut out the first six songs, where I'm probably singing a different tune and saying that this is a good album, honestly. If it starts with like Pimmy's Dilemma and it just continues on, yeah, there's still some songs that I wouldn't really gravitate towards after Pimmy's Dilemma, but still I can appreciate the fact that at that point it would be um 15 songs and probably one, two, three, four, five, six, seven. I'd like eight out of the 15 songs after Pimmy, starting with
yeah.
Pimmy's Dilemma. And I think that's obviously a way better percentage than when you add in the six songs, I only like eight out of 20, 21. I don't really have anything to say about the first six songs. I'm not really a fan of them. I
No,
think Superman, I like Spider-Man,
I like
Superman. I think that one has some potential. But at the
yeah.
same time, like the lack of passion and like just like the dryness with their vocals, or it just like it doesn't reach the potential that it's supposed to reach, I feel
Man,
like.
the Crying in Chanel, I really like Crying in Chanel. It's like almost like two different songs in one, which there's a lot of beat switches on here, and we've talked about it like years ago. Where like beat switches, I feel like to me are like a cheat code a lot of time, and I don't like that cheat code very much most of the time. But like Crying in Chanel, I love like the first like half of it where it's like about you know the sentimental gifts that she can't part with or whatever, and then he's like then he has a crazy verse where he's like, I'll buy something better for you, fuck it, you know what I mean? Like, and I'm like, okay, cool, like we're here. And then the instrumental that ends Crying in Chanel is crazy,
Mhm.
right? Like, and I thought that was going to continue, but then it just cuts off. So it's like, all right, like, you know what I mean? It's like a little more like intense than the rest of the album, and then it just goes like, you know, Spider-Man, Superman, I don't mind it. Deeper, which is just PND, like it's a PND song for sure.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like Small Town Fame doesn't do it for me really, but it's like it's got the like, you know, it's got like probably the most viral like bars coming out of it right now where he talks
Mhm.
about Tate McRae and Charlie XCX. But like you said, man, like if we started with Pimmy's Dilemma and then the track listing was a little different from there on out, like I wouldn't want to go Pimmy's Dilemma straight into Brian Steele, Give Me a Hug.
Yeah. Yeah.
But like that would be a perfect intro, right? Like it's because the whole like sentiment of the song is like, you know, Pim singing about like I don't like it when you go out with your friends because they don't
Mhm.
keep you in check and they let you do what you want. And that's the vibe of this album, right? Like that is the vibe of this album. It's like these two guys who are super sappy, super fucking sad all over it, and they're trying to get, you know what I mean? They're like trying to convince women to like settle down with them, but like on Pim said, like what Pim said, she's like, no, like you have shown me that that's not a good idea, right? And like there's a lot of people who are like, oh man, you're 38, whatever, like grow up. And it's like, I get that part too. But it's like, we have enough time with Drake, man, where it's like, this has been the same rap she's been doing since,
Yeah.
right? So like, I'm not in that camp. For a while, when I thought he was getting to that point, I was like, oh, we're getting like more like Mafia Drake, which I was
Mhm.
excited for. And that was like 2019, 2020. That didn't happen. So I'm like way past that. Like, it's like, all right, we're going to get like on Give Me a Hug, right? Like, I think the Give Me a Hug, right? Like, that's not my favorite part in the world, but that is a quintessential Drake song. That's
Yeah.
like the same, like, he loves the strip club. And you know what I mean? Like, it's just the fact of the matter. The guy, like, he just loves the strip club. And can people be like, oh, like, you know, you shouldn't be loving the strip club at 38? Like, sure, I guess. But like, it's just what it is, right?
Yeah.
If you don't want to, like, but I think you're right though. If we started at Pimmy's Dilemma and then like reorganized some things, I think you'd have a very solid album. Even if you like dropped Crying in Chanel into it, you know, and figured it out some way. But like, man, Pimmy's Dilemma, you got two good rap songs and Brian Steele and Give Me a Hug. Raining in
Mhm.
Houston, I like it.
I like Raining in
Like
Houston
the
also.
I like Raining in Houston a lot. Like the whole like get on 85, drive past A&M, like you know what I
Mhm.
mean? Like we're not arguing this time or whatever. Like That's what I'm trying to hear from Drake on an album like this. And then lasers is the interesting concept, man. Like the whole like get that tattoo removed
Yeah,
because
that one, like,
I don't want to see it anymore.
yeah, I wasn't really a fan of that one either. Like I said, Meet Your Padre, I was willing to rock with it until Party Next Door ruined it for me. And then we get to like the creme de la creme of this album, where we have Nokia and Die Trying.
Baby
Like Nokia,
girl.
like Nokia, like it's just like such a lively. I think this is the most fun that I feel from a song on this album.
Yeah,
And
for
I
sure.
appreciate that, especially having Elkin, the producer, like have vocals on that also, like in the back and forth between Elkin and Drake. I appreciate that. The beat switch in the middle is crazy. Like the production on this project or on this song in particular is just crazy. And I this is the one that if I had to pick one hit, I would either pick I would pick this one if it was like a if I had to say a hip hop hit, I would say Nokia. If I had to say like a pop hit, I would say Die Trying.
Yeah. Nokia's a good line of demarcation for me, right? Because like I feel like before the beef, people didn't want to like Drake, but if he dropped something like really good, people would be like, "All right, this is good. Like
Mhm.
we can party to this, whatever." Now we're in a different time. Now we're in a time where people don't like Drake, right? Like they don't like Drake. So I am curious to see because I think Nokia has like the most potential here to
Yeah,
like become the one from this album. So it'll be interesting to see if the people who used to be like, man, I don't really want to like Drake, but if he puts out a nice for what or whatever, like, all right, we're gonna play it. You know what I mean? Like, I do wonder if Nokia has that same effect, or if it's people who are just like, no, like I'm not. I don't care. I don't care if it's fun.
yeah. I moving on to Die Trying. I think the guitar driven pop beat works really well with Drake's voice, with Drake's singing voice. With Party Next Door's voice, I was surprised it works well with his voice also.
Yeah,
And I think that that song is the best display of chemistry between the two artists. The only issue I have with it is I would have loved if Yeba had a bigger presence on the track because I
yeah,
think she could have, they could have probably made that track a little bit longer so that she could have had more runway. But overall, I appreciated her contribution as well. And I think that's, like I said, like if I had to pick the best pop track I would pick Die Trying.
yeah. I agree. I agree. I like Die Trying. Like, it's one of the first times we've heard Drake like get it get advice from his dad and be like, I don't know if that's the best advice. Like, he says it. He's like, my dad told me that, these women don't love me, and he's like, I'll keep that in mind, but I don't think that's words to live by. You know what I mean? So it's like that feels like the most human moment on this whole
Mm.
album. You know what I mean? And I
Yeah.
thought that we were gonna get more of that throughout, but that's the most human. And then I really like Somebody Loves Me.
Yeah. I
I
like that one
really
too.
like that. But then if you go like Celibacy on My Way, like
Yeah.
it's
Nah.
kind of filler to me. And then I like the last three in a row. I like Glorious, When He's Gone, and Greedy, but
Mhm.
I do think that I do think we lose some momentum after Somebody Loves Me.
Yeah.
Especially it's just tough when you have like Nokia and Die Trying is like starting off like the this or like ending like the second third of the album.
Yeah.
It's like it's hard to live up to that, especially when you don't have like a concrete outro here. Like I feel like all these songs I feel like Somebody Loves Me could have been like the last song. I feel like Pimmy's Dilemma could have been the last song. I feel like Die Trying could have been the last song. So we end on that concrete note, and then you go back to the beginning, and you're like almost like waiting for that end again, right? And that's the
Yeah.
beauty of intros and outros is like you love starting one way and ending one way, and we don't get that here.
Yeah, I think Somebody Loves Me is an example of the passionate vocals I was looking for throughout the album. If
Yeah,
they sang like
exactly.
that the whole album, I probably once again I'm singing a different tune. Like I think a lot like this album had potential. Before we get to playback value, I think that this album had potential, but then at the end of the day, like it's self-inflicted mistakes, and really the main mistakes are lack of effort. It feels like.
Yeah, yeah, and it's hard because I don't know if it's lack. I think it's something that like all artists deal with when they get to a certain point. Maybe not all, but it's just it like we were talking about. It's like you get to a certain level and everything you do goes number one. Everything you do, you know what I mean, works like, financially and it creates enough buzz. And I think that it's easy to get trapped in that a little bit. And it can be disappointing, honestly, when we get a moment like Nokia,
Yeah,
right? It can be disappointing because it's like all right, we know it's there. We know it's there. We're just waiting for a whole album. And this has been my complaint with Drake music since views, right? Since streaming became the main way to listen to music, we get these 20, 25 track albums. And some of them, like I like Scorpion A side and B side, right? But like More Life, I think has a lot on it that bogs it down. I think that Certified Lover Boy, I think For All the Dogs have songs that bog it down, and I think that's the case here.
Yeah. Playback value.
Objectively, it's Drake. Like if Nokia catches, I think we get months out of this,
Hmm.
right? Like if Die Trying catches, like especially Nokia and Die Trying, especially with the summer coming up or whatever, like I think those have the potential to keep this for months. So that yeah, objectively, it's gonna last for months because it's Drake. For me, I'm gonna take certain songs from this, but like this is not. Unfortunately, this album isn't going in my main rotation of
Yeah.
Drake when I listen to it. So it's hard for me to put an exact timeline on it, but like
Mhm.
I'll take the songs that I really love forever, right? And the rest are probably gonna be, skips from here on out.
Yeah. For me, I try to keep objective value like objective as possible, and I try to think of like the casual fan when I said this. And for that reason, I have it going 2 weeks. I feel like the Drake stands are gonna love it forever, like you said. But I feel like the Drake haters are gonna hate this forever. But I feel like the casual fan, like there just isn't enough good songs to keep this album being played over and over and over again. There are good moments, and I'm sure that casual fans would love those good moments for months. But overall, when you factor in the full 21 tracks, I think 2 weeks is probably the max that we'll get from this album. For me, subjectively, there's no playback value here, honestly. Like there are some songs that I like and there are some songs that I will listen to again, but then again, like I mentioned earlier, like he's 8 for 21. Like that's just not acceptable, except especially when you're the superstar of the magnitude like Drake. Final thoughts?
Yeah, I think my final thought is like this is just clearly aside of the little references to the beef, this is Drake trying to push forward and get back to a that like sad, sappy, cold Toronto sound that we're used to, and there's no one better to do that with than Party Next Door. So I think this is an attempt to move forward. You know what I mean? Like he said he's got a solo album, that'll come when the time is right. We'll see when that happens. Because that'll be like the ultimate test of moving forward or whatever. But I think that this is the right a step in the right direction to move on from the beef. Like obviously they're going to talk about it forever, but that's how I feel. I think it's a retreat to a sound that we're used to, that a lot of people love, that I've loved, in the past and love parts of this now. But that's my final thought. My favorite songs here in order are, I think Die Trying for me is the best. Somebody Loves Me would be second, and then Pimmy's Dilemma third.
Okay. For me, I would say that this collab album has some flashes of brilliance, but not enough to propel this album beyond the status of mid due to inconsistent track listing and too many filler tracks. Overall, it's not enough to make hip hop forgive and forget the past year of Drake's clown behavior that was magnified by the dominance of Kendrick's W in their rap beef. My top three tracks: number three, Pimmy's Dilemma; number two, Nokia; and number one, Die Trying. And this has been the Cap Podcast, episode 602. Don't forget to leave your opinion of some sexy songs for you in the comments below. If you enjoyed this episode, feel free to like it, subscribe to the channel, share with your friends, follow Old Milk on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok at Old Milk Media. Check out oldmilk.co for more information. I'm Nate Sperling, that's Taylor McLeod, and we'll be back when hip hop tells us to be. We are out. Thank you for watching.
Baby girl.